So all of our web channel, so keep your eyes peeled for any further ones appearing, including today's, over the coming weeks and months. So the agenda for today is as follows. We're going to kickstart things off with another real-life case study. So this time it's going to be around a mineshaft collapse up in the middle of a residential area in Glasgow. We'll then move on to looking at how the risks shown throughout the case study would appear in the official CON 29M, as well as the recommended additional reports highlighted as a result of the risks. Once we've demonstrated the journey of how everything then links together, we'll cover off the deeper detail held within each of the additional reports and what information you can expect to see. We'll then finish everything off with a quick summary, summarising of a few key facts for each of the particular products. Right then, so we're going to kickstart with a case study. So the collapse we're going to look at today took place up in the northwest of Glasgow back in August 2011 in a residential area comprising mainly of semi-detached houses, but there were a few kind of odd terrace properties thrown into the mix as well. So as with all surface hazards on the coalfield, this particular one was brought to our attention and the attention of our public safety and substance team when the local authority contacted us using our hazards hotline, which we man 24/7. So it's our public safety and substance team, or otherwise known as PS&S. It's their statutory responsibility to manage all coal mining related surface hazards. So it's this team who would take control and manage any occurrences like this. So what we're going to do now is talk you through the events and actions from start to finish, showing you how PS&S handled this particular collapse. To start with, let's take a couple of steps back. Now, as with most of these types of hazards, a local resident was the first to spot the hole, and they contacted the police and their local authority, and describing the hole as being around about 6 metres across and somewhere between 4 and 5 metres deep. Now, the collapse itself, which was sandwiched between a group of separate garages, and in the middle of 2 rows of residential property, so semi-detached properties. And the local residents were concerned, as I'm sure you can probably imagine, about how quickly the collapse had occurred, and as you would equally expect, they were very concerned about how it could or equally would impact their own properties. So once the local authority had arrived at the collapse, and with them being unaware of exactly what had caused it at this point in time, they erected the pedestrian barrier around the hole and then contacted us via our emergency hazards hotline. So this is then where we took over. Once the call had been received on our hazards hotline, a regional project manager from our PS&S team was then deployed to the site. So safety is always the first priority, so upon arriving, the first thing they did was to put up a more fit-for-purpose barrier, fencing off a wider area with the sole purpose of protecting the public. And this was mainly down to the fact that the pedestrian fencing simply wasn't sufficient enough for the risk that the hole posed. Now, once the fencing was in place, the regional project manager then started to evaluate the site and quickly spotted some tension cracks appearing on the ground surrounding the collapse itself, and they noticed that these were growing as time went by. Now, our immediate consideration at this point was that because the properties nearby were semi-detached, there was a recognised risk that the impacts affecting one property could also end up affecting the adjoining properties too. So as I say, with any surface hazard, safety is and always will be our first priority. So after noticing these tension cracks, action clearly needed to be taken, and quickly. With this in mind, a decision was made to evacuate the 4 properties immediately adjacent to the collapse, with a sizable exclusion zone being established, which also included all of the land between the properties as well. So this allowed us to prevent access to the area and as such, any potential risks to life. Now, once we were comfortable that the collapse posed no further immediate risks, we could then kickstart our investigations. Now, here at the Coal Authority, we have the UK's most advanced database of coal mining information, and it's this database which always forms part of our investigations. So from the offset, the database will tell us the details of any known abandoned mines in the area, shaft locations of those mines, for those mines, and the coal seams worked, any geological anomalies, subsidence claims on nearby properties, and then the likes of any coal-related incidents. So going back to the investigations, once we got started, our initial desktop investigation showed straight away that there were actually 2 shafts positioned within 7 meters of each other and very close to the collapse zone. So the likelihood of the collapse being associated to a coal mining related risk were clearly pretty high. You can see on the image on screen how the 2 mine entries shown on our system alongside the residential properties and garages. Now the one circled in red is the shaft relevant to the location of the collapse that we've just seen, and the kind of the one we've been discussing mainly up to now. And the one in blue is the additional one that was nearby. The thing worth highlighting with this case, however, is that due to the time the shafts were worked, it was likely that they were worked prior to the 1872 Act of Parliament. So it was the 1872 Act that made it a legal requirement to maintain accurate mine plans with a final abandonment plan needing to be deposited once the mine had been closed. So given this factor, we also utilised historical ordnance survey plans, and these helped to show that in 1864 the site was simply an open field. This thing changed in 1933 when the area was developed with residential properties clearly showing. Most noticeably, properties 11 and 15 were showing. However, when looking at the 1949 OS plans, these properties were all of a sudden missing. So the eagle-eyed ones of you on the webinar today would probably have already spotted that on the screen, on the slide on screen. And incidentally, just to call out, in Glasgow at this particular time, there were no number 13 properties. Now, when the team approached Glasgow City Council about the missing number 11 and 15 properties, they suggested that they could have been demolished during the Second World War by a stray bomb, which was probably meant for the nearby shipbuilding yards, the Clydebank yards. So these shipyards were heavily bombed during the war, so it seemed feasible initially. However, after speaking to local residents, the anecdotal feedback included memories of a large hole opening up and swallowing the former properties around 1947. We then had other residents who also remembered structural works being undertaken to the remaining properties during the 1960s following some further ground movement. So what does all this tell us? Well, basically, the public records are often incomplete. So as the investigations continued, the lack of accurate information hindered the speed at which we could understand and resolve the incident, and this merely demonstrates the need to collect, store, and access accurate mining information over longer periods of time. So moving away from the investigations, in an attempt to control the collapse and prevent it spreading, we placed 100 tonnes of 40 mil stone into the void, and this was all done with the support of our contractors who brought it to site for us. And given the nature of the collapse and the tension cracks that we mentioned earlier on, we used a telehandler with an extending jib just to push the stone into the void from a safe distance. So once all the stone was in place, we were confident this would help to offer some initial lateral support to the collapse. So what happened next? Now, without me clearly stating the obvious here, you can see from the photo on screen that the collapse escalated. Within 48 hours of that initial 100 tonnes of stone being placed into the collapse, it had pretty much all disappeared. And with the further ground movement taking place, and at this time, it started to take one of the garages with it. And obviously that's demonstrated in the picture you can see on screen. Given the type of the garage, we appointed a specialist asbestos removal contractor to help dismantle it and remove those elements that contained, or we suspected contained, asbestos, and remove the garage from the site. However, due to the sheer rate of ongoing movement, the garage, or what was left of it, disappeared deep into the void before we could finish the job. As with any initial attempts of loading, as with the initial attempts of loading stone into the void, we then placed an additional 530 tonnes of stone into the collapse, again to try and help with lateral support. So in total, the void has now taken 630 tonnes of stone to help control the collapse, as well as not forgetting the half of the garage that it's swallowed up as well. So ground movement continued to take place even after the additional stone, so unfortunately it became necessary to purchase and demolish 4 properties and 5 garages within this area. Now clearly this is never an easy thing to have to do, and is something that where stakeholder engagement is key. This is where our experts within our public safety and subsidence team lead the way, and this is a hugely sensitive thing and must clearly be handled in the correct fashion. So our stakeholder experts deal with all of the residents through utilising robust communication plans, and they then ensure that everything is handled correctly and with the utmost care. So the demolition itself, once completed, the cleared area allowed us to fully investigate and design an engineering solution to resolve the issues. And once the demolition had been fully completed, it revealed the open shaft feature that we looked at in the first slide, which was directly beneath the adjacent property. So once the site was clear and accessible, we undertook detailed ground investigations using the likes of an angle drilling system, so we remained outside of the exclusion zone. Now, I know I've used the phrase quite a lot so far, but safety is always our first consideration. So on sites like this, we usually have to think right outside of the box so we can conduct our investigations and work safely, even in tricky sites like this. Taking this particular approach with the drilling allowed us to then establish that the collapse had been caused by a failure of the initial recorded shaft. So to recap, that was the one we highlighted in red on the earlier slides. And we took extreme care when drilling our boreholes too. So these boreholes helped our investigations by confirming the information we'd gathered from BGS, which indicated that superficial or drift deposits made up of boulder clay and other deposits were at a depth of around 23 meters within this location. And all of this was sitting on top of carboniferous limestone. A quick note for those who aren't fully up to speed on the superficial deposit side of things. So these are basically geological deposits, almost like rock strata, that are quite young. However, when I say young, I mean as in less than 2.6 million years old. So anyway, the deposits rest on top of the older rocks that can then bear the weight of structures. However, with deep and weak superficial deposits, the risk of ground failure is of course increased around the voided mine shafts themselves. So this then makes it much harder to treat due to the sheer size of the potential failure cone around the shaft. Taking all this into account, and then before we move on to the next slide, you can see in the technical drawing on screen the platform system we use to address these issues that I've just spoken through, at the same time as ensuring the safety of the people working on site, allowing us to proceed with an engineering solution. Now, on the slide on screen, you can see where the technical drawing comes to life. So this photo shows the platform system in its kind of real-life flesh. So due to the high risk of further collapses migrating outside of the initial site, it was decided to fill and stabilize the shafts with stone and grout. So this is obviously a method that's quite commonly used in this sort of hazard. Now, because of the issues we talked through on the previous slides, the safest way of carrying this work out is from the two separate platforms positioned above each of the shafts. You can clearly see the vastness of the platforms, but for them to serve their purpose and keep the workforce safe, they needed to span the whole potential shaft failure zone, which is why they are the size that they are. So once the platforms were in place, we were able to then really start progressing our engineering solution, but getting the platforms into place to start with was quite the challenge. And we needed to utilize a 200-ton crane to lift them into position, which, given the fact that the collapse was in a highly populated residential area, was no easy task in itself. However, once the challenges were overcome with getting them in place, we were then able to position the drilling rigs comfortably over the holes to help us confirm the condition of the shaft, the type of materials used in the past to fill the voids, and then equally to what extent. Once we'd got started and managed to break through the top of the shaft voids, we found various different building materials as well as large amounts of wood. So instantly, this indicated to us that the shaft had probably been capped previously with wooden staging at rock head level upon its abandonment. So what this also told us was that it was likely to have been part breached in the 1940s and 1960s, causing surface materials to fall into the shaft's failure cone. It's worth pointing out at this stage, though, that there was no evidence whatsoever to suggest that whoever undertook the demolition or repair work based in the 40s and 60s knew anything about these abandoned mine shafts, and nor how they should have been properly treated. So this definitely isn't a blame-placing game. Moving forward a bit, both shafts were then drilled and grouted from their full depths right back up to ground level. The grout was brought to site using tankers and placed into silos on site, making it easier for us to then pump the final solution straight down into the shafts. Back on the subject of the drift deposits within the cone of collapse, as these had been disturbed, they were then stabilized again by drilling and grouting using a simple grid pattern. And here we go. So this photo shows you the end result once all the groundworks have been completed, with a sustainable and long-term solution in place for both shafts, ensuring no further collapses occurred in the future. Because of the history with this particular site, and given the various different turns of events that we've highlighted throughout the discussion today, we monitored this site for a period of 12 months once the works had been completed, with an additional 12 months of monitoring taking place on the nearby properties to help give peace of mind to both ourselves and the residents. Now, during this 24-month period, a settlement totaling 1.5 mil was experienced, but this was all put down to thermal movement, and we were confident it certainly posed no new risks. Now, as we mentioned earlier in the case study, because of the risks, the Coal Authority actually purchased the properties and garages on the original site, meaning that we now owned and held responsibility for this particular site. So our intentions, along with Glasgow City Council planners, is to return the site back to residential housing without building directly over the new mine entry caps. And this is still very much an ongoing discussion. So to see the plan through, it's clearly important that we work very closely with local residents and the local planning authorities to ensure the site remains safe and usable for years to come. So one final point to end on is all around the new data and information that came to light throughout this whole situation. So we at the Coal Authority pride ourselves on having the most up-to-date and high-tech coal mining database system in the UK. And this can only be achieved by ensuring it remains up-to-date through importing new information that comes to light, such as all of this. So all of this is undertaken by our expert mining information managers on site, who are some of the best at what they do, ensuring unrivaled accuracy with any new entries into our database. So this case study has obviously flagged a lot of new and previously unknown information, and all of this has since now been loaded into our database to ensure that if this level of detail was ever needed again in the future for this particular site, it would all be there ready and waiting. So that concludes the case study side of things today. What we're going to do now is walk you through how and where the risks associated with the case study that we've just discussed are highlighted within the official Con 29M, and then equally where the additional recommended reports would come into play. Here you can see a copy of the Coal Authority summary table on the left-hand side, and it's worth noting that this is a live Con 29M for the actual site we've just been discussing. Equally, it's worth pointing out that the report content you're looking at on screen shows all of the updated information since the case study groundworks were completed. So it's this content that would now be shown within any official Con 29M purchase for this particular area. So back to the information supplied within the Law Society approved questions, the first thing we're going to talk through is question 4, which is mine entries. So you can see that highlighted on your screen. As you would expect for this site, mine entries have been flagged as a risk here. And when you delve into and digest the information within the report, you can see the level of information supplied as standard. The interesting piece, and the reason we're going to look at the additional recommended mine entry reports, is the part highlighted with the red box on the right-hand side of your screen. Now what this basically tells you is that there are risks within the defined boundary area that was requested, and our recommendations of the appropriate additional follow-on reports is X as a result of this. So the follow-on reports are also called out at the bottom under the recommended reports list on the summary table itself, so you can see those on the bottom left-hand side. So what we'll do now then is talk you through the content of the 2 different mine entry reports, which can be ordered as an additional follow-on piece of information. Before we get started with the detail though, something I always tend to recap on is the difference between a shaft and an adit. So in simplistic terms, they're both the same type of entry to a mine, but a shaft is vertical and an adit is diagonal. Right then, so what do you get included in the first of the 2 mine entry reports, being the mine entry interpretive report? So you'll get a detailed table of key information for each of the known mine entries highlighted within the initial Con 29M. You'll get a detailed individual risk assessment on each of the entries highlighted. We'll supply details of our statutory obligations when it comes to any remedies regarding the mine entries themselves. And then finally, you'll get a conclusive statement which will highlight any considerations that may need to be taken into account, which for obvious reasons is particularly useful to help ease, or equally, on the flip side of that, confirm any fears for the potential property purchaser. Before we move on to the second available mine entry report, there's 2 things to call out here. So the first is that the mine entry interpretive report is only applicable if there is an existing property footprint within the original geography supplied for the initial report. So if there's no property, or equally if there is but you're looking to develop it, i.e. breaking ground elsewhere within the grounds, you'll need a mine entry plan and data sheets report, and we'll come on to that one next. The second thing to call out is the report is designed to give peace of mind to anyone purchasing a property, whether it's a residential or non-residential, and equally any mortgage lenders who may have raised concerns when reviewing the outputs of the initial official Con 29M. So there's thousands of recorded mine entries throughout the UK, and it's very rare that they pose any initial risk or will create the homeowners any issues. So what if the mine entries are highlighted, but there's no existing property footprint, or there is, but you're looking to extend or develop that particular property? Now this is where the mine entry plans and data sheets comes into play. So this is very similar to the mine entry interpretive report, given the nature of what it's designed to do, except with this report you can pick and choose exactly which mine entries you would like the information supplying for. So this basically means that you can pretty much have a bespoke and tailored report rather than having to have everything and digest it all. This report really comes into its own for people who are looking to develop large sections of land with properties or putting properties into, as this can call out exactly where the individual mine entries are, which then in turn can help you as a developer to understand any potential risks and amend your plans accordingly if required to avoid them. So this is supported by the fact that you'll get a detailed map showing all of the individual mine entry locations. We do also offer an advanced level of service around this particular subject with a huge amount more information and a lot of desktop-based expertise put into it as well. And we refer to this internally as a pre-planning application mining report. But for the purpose of today, we'll park that one and we'll come on to that at a later point. So that concludes the additional recommended reports for the mine entry side of things. Now we'll take a look at the various claims reports. So coal mining related subsidence claims is something our PS&S team handle as part of our statutory obligations here at the Coal Authority, and all of this information is in turn made available within the official Con 29M. Focusing again on the live example for the Glasgow site that we've been kind of discussing throughout today's webinar, you can see that question 9 has been flagged as saying yes, there have been subsidence claims in this area. Then once again, as with the mine entries, the appropriate follow-on report is recommended at the bottom of the official Con 29M, and this time it mentions the coal mining subsidence claims 50-metre buffer report and the coal mining subsidence claims history. So these two reports make up 2 of the 3 available reports for the claim side of things that we offer here, and the third is the subsidence claims search. Now, it's worth calling out that as far as the subsidence claim search is concerned, this information comes as standard as part of the official Con 29M, and you can see a live example of this on the right-hand side of your screen. So this will show you, this will show you a high-level detail of all of the claims within 20 metres of the property boundary, and within this you'll get the address of the property which the subsidence claim was logged under, when the claim was logged, whether it has been accepted, rejected, or equally whether it's still being determined, and how much compensation has been paid out as a result. It'll also call out whether there are any existing stop notices on the property, and what this basically means is that we're postponing any repairs to the property under our statutory obligations for up to 18 months, as we're expecting further ground movement before things fully settle. So whilst these elements do come as standard within the official Con 29M, we can also supply this information separately as a standalone report if it is ever required. That's just something you need to ask for. Now let's move on to talking about the first of the 2 other subsidence claims reports. Right, so we're going to start with the subsidence claims buffer report. Now the buffer report is designed with one main goal in mind, and this is to draw attention to any subsidence claims that sit outside of the initial boundary queried but within 50 metres of it, or in other words the buffer zone. So for obvious reasons this sort of report is particularly useful if you're in a bank of terraced properties. This report in simplistic terms gives you everything you would receive within the subsidence claim search, the one we've just discussed, and what this will also do is then look out at the 50-metre buffer zone instead. So it's worth noting that this report will only pick up claims outside of the property boundary, but within 50 metres of it, and it will not show any details for claims within the boundary itself. If you want these, obviously they can be referred to and viewed within the original Con 29M itself. Moving on to the third and final follow-on recommended claims report, we come to the subsidence claims history. So this is a totally bespoke product, and it's fully dependent on the claim that was made. So when this product is requested, a member of the team will go out and retrieve all of the various documents from our archives, collating all of the information required that's relevant to the particular claim, and assembling original documents and issuing all of these out to the customer. So when supplied, the claims history will include copies of every document involved within the claim, giving a detailed history of all the work that took place, when and why, and helping potential property purchasers to remain fully informed before they part with any funds. When you order this product, it has to be ordered with a particular property and claim in mind. So in theory, you would need a separate substance claims history pack for each individual property if you wanted to investigate the claims on more than one property. And that's one good thing to bear in mind. Okay, so moving away from the more common recommended reports that we kind of put out there in the Con 29M, we'll now take a look at the mine gas emissions. So for the particular case study example we've been looking at, there wasn't any mine gas issues raised, and as such, you would see the statement under question 10 of the Law Society approved questions shown on screen. However, if a mine gas issue was raised, you would be presented with this type of statement, with a recommendation once again at the bottom of the official Con 29M suggesting that a follow-on mine gas emissions report is purchased. If mine gas is flagged on the Con 29M, it's usually down to remediation works being conducted to resolve mine gas issues, and as such, it's usually a case that one of our monitoring stations are highlighted. Now, we refer to those internally as liability sites, rather than it actually being a direct risk to the public. These monitoring stations are simply a means of controlling mine gas emissions and keeping an eye on what's happening out there. To give a quick overview of what mine gas emissions actually are, the atmosphere within the confined space of an old mine is normally a mixture of atmospheric air and various pollutants. And these pollutants are usually either generated naturally or as a result of the physical mining process itself. In many cases, these pollutants, which include the likes of carbon dioxide, methane, and carbon monoxide, can be present in dangerous levels. But this is simply down to the fact that they're present within a very confined space and as such become more concentrated. But once released in a controlled fashion, can actually be completely displaced into the open air. So we currently have just over 700 mine gas monitoring points and an additional 200 mine gas events across the UK, which combined help us to understand exactly what mine gas activity is taking place throughout the UK's coalfields, allowing us to build up an immense level of expertise and detailed data sets. So our in-house mine gas experts here at the Coal Authority are responsible for managing the three gases that I just mentioned, as well as hydrogen sulfide. And it's these experts who support the addressing of any issues and utilising our unique data sets and knowledge to monitor and remediate any mine gas concerns. So although it can seem that I've kind of played down mine gas emissions a little, don't forget that all mine gases are very dangerous when they exist within confined spaces. So for example, mine workings and mine entries that are open at surface level, surface collapses or mine entries, or equally if they simply find their way to a confined space near or at the surface. So drains are a great example of this sort of thing. Given that the four gases that I've mentioned are generally colourless and odourless and as such only truly detectable if you're actually looking for them, it makes them particularly dangerous hidden risks. As with our surface hazards, we operate a 24/7 response system for mine gas hazards, with us responding immediately. We'll then investigate, assess and monitor the site as required, with remediation actions taking place on an emergency basis. The final note to call out on this slide is that we use our extensive knowledge and expertise that we've built up on the mine gas side of things to monitor their migration paths and in turn predict and manage any potential hazards in the future. So what do you get in a mine gas emissions report? You'll get a detailed report from one of our in-house experts and one of the actual mine gas specialists themselves. You'll get extensive details of any works carried out in relation to the mine gas emissions, stating whether a venting station has been built to manage any ongoing emissions, including its location shown on the plan. And this will usually come complete with pictures where appropriate. Some of these venting or monitoring stations aren't always necessarily immediately apparent to the untrained eye when you're looking around the site or a particular area. And you'll also get any details around the various gases which have been recorded at the site, and as part of this you'll get graphs showing the monitored levels over a period of time. Now we move on to the last of the recommended follow-on reports, which is the surface hazard incident reports. So any situations where this is relevant would be raised within question 11 under hazards relating to coal mining. Focusing back on the Glasgow site, as you would probably expect, this section is flagged as yes, there are recorded surface hazards at this location, and once again, as with the follow-on, as with all of the other follow-on reports, an additional report has been recommended at the bottom of the official Con 29M. So we here at the Coal Authority handle on average just over 1,000 surface hazards each year. So this is something that can be flagged on our official Con 29M report quite often. And when it is, if a surface hazard incident report is being purchased, you will get a detailed report of the property in question and the boundary. You'll get copies of all of the incident reports for that particular location, along with any inspection reports and copies of all relevant correspondence, including the likes of meeting notes with any kind of local residents. There'll be information regarding any repairs undertaking, and you will also get any available technical drawings supplied as part of this from our in-house engineers, and any information regarding non-coal related damage that was flagged at the same time. Further additional information on surface hazards is available from the Coal Authority, and again, as with the claims history pack, these are totally bespoke for each and every incident within any given boundary. If you ever need this additional information, just contact a member of the team and we'll talk you through the process. Okay then, so let's finish up by recapping each report, looking at some of the additional key facts. So when we talk about the two different mine entry reports, if there's an existing property footprint, you'll need the mine entry interpretive report, but if it's a piece of land or there's going to be development of the existing property footprint, you'll need the mine entry plans and data sheets. With the mine entry interpretive report, if you have the original reference number from the official Con 29M, this can simply be loaded into the ordering system when you start the online transaction, and it will automatically recall the same boundary map for you and bypass all of the boundary drawing screens altogether. So this then speeds things up massively for you as the customer and ensures the information remains true between the two reports, which is quite a big point there. With the mine entry plan and data sheet side of things, because you can pick and choose exactly what you want, the original ordering process remains. So as with nearly all of our reports, if you process the order yourself on our online ordering site, groundstability.com, 99% of the reports are back with you within 24 hours, helping you to process your side of things quickly and efficiently. And to be fair, the reports are usually back in your inbox within 60 minutes. As with the mine entry reports, all of our subsidence claims reports can be fast-tracked for our online ordering system, and you can utilise the original reference numbers on some of these reports as well that is detailed from the Con 29M. The only thing to call out regarding the claims reports are when it comes to the turnaround times on the subsidence claims history. And because of the manual retrieval of documents and the nature of how this particular pack of information is built, this can take up to 5 working days. Finishing up with the mine gas emissions and the surface hazard incident reports, the same is true for these as with all of our other follow-on reports. If you use your original Con 29M reference number, your transaction is fast-tracked through the system. And as with the substance claims history pack, because these are tailored packs of information with the expertise from our various teams internally being added into that mix, they can take up to 5 days to be supplied. So do bear with us, but as with any of our sort of reports, if you're in a particular hurry for them, give us a ring and we'll see what we can do for you. So all the reports we've discussed today are available via our online ordering platform at groundstability.com, and all these reports are available in sample form to download from our website as a PDF if you want to take a closer look at them. Equally, if you have any questions about any of the reports, or if you're unsure about which one you really need, feel free to contact a member of our kind of specialist team within the mining reports team themselves here at the Coal Authority, and they'll happily take the time to talk you through everything. And you can see the phone number for our team on the screen here, along with the actual web address for our ground stability site. Okay, so that concludes our webinar for today. I hope you've all enjoyed listening and have found the content interesting, and if so, please do keep your eyes peeled for further updates and webinars from the Coal Authority in the future. Equally, once you've gone away and reflected on today's webinar, I'd also encourage you to pass us any feedback on the content, the delivery, and anything else you'd like to see from us in webinar format in the future from the Coal Authority. So we will be sending out a quick and simple survey shortly after the webinar is finished. So please do take a couple of minutes to complete it, as we value your opinions. We want that feedback. Now, as I mentioned at the start, we've been gathering all your questions throughout today's webinar, and we'll look to supply all of these with responses in the way of a handy FAQ document. So this will be shared with all attendees once the webinars have been completed this month, allowing us to capture questions from all of our separate sessions. If you have any other questions or comments and you'd like to contact me directly, my contact details can be found on the screen, and a recording of today's webinar will be available on the YouTube channel later this week. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great afternoon.